So last night I made a video reviewing the compilation video of Andrew Yang's debate highlights. That is getting a lot of views. The views are still coming in, and I've, already gone up quite a bit in subscribers as a bit of that. So clearly there's a lot of interest in Andrew Yang out there. A lot of people wanting to look more into him and his candidacy, and a lot of people, I guess, more curious about his policies. And some comments that were left on that video were people wanting me to talk more about some of his policies, get a little more in depth, not just review what he said in the debate, but actually talk about what he supports as a candidate. So obviously, basically his three big principles from what I've, read up on, tried to study about him. Obviously, he's a supporter of Medicare for All. It's on his website. We've covered Medicare for All on the channel, the benefits of that, so I don't want to try to touch on that too much because I've gone into that multiple times. And it's not that I'm scared to talk about it. I would just encourage you, if you want to hear that aspect and that argument of it, go back and check out some of the other videos that I've done on that. I'm definitely a supporter of the Medicare for All system. The biggest issue you hear too many people saying is, well, how do we pay for it? How do we pay for it? There's such a big hole in it. It can't be funded, blah, 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 blah. And again, I say, clearly it is possible, or other countries wouldn't be doing something similar today. The UK has it, and you talk to people from the UK, and they can't believe that it is such a heavily debated issue in this country. They sit back and saying, really, you guys are having such a problem with this? This is a norm for us. Okay? So if it's really that hard to be done, how are so many other developed countries able to do it? Fact of the matter is, deep down, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, and you really don't have to be a healthcare expert to understand the people who are in such opposition for it are people who have been so in the tank with Big Pharma and, the health insurance companies over the years. That's their funding, that's their cash cow, that's their golden egg laying goose, and they're not going to go against them because, why would you? You're going to lose that money and you're going to lose that funding, and we have elections to win. Okay? So that's pretty much a brief summary on the Medicare for All system. Completely agree with it. But his other three big things aside from that, human-centered capitalism. So basically, what I've gathered, his version and what he's trying to say by human-centered capitalism is we need a capitalist system that actually helps the people again. So the competition of ideas and products and services that are good for the American people, we need more of that. We need less crony capitalism and less corporatism. Hey, I've been saying that for a long time myself. So, agree with him completely on that as well. Now, the one thing that it seems to be, I had to do some homework on this myself. I hadn't really studied a lot into it. So, that being said, last night I started doing some digging, continued on into this morning. And that is the universal basic income. Now, I spoke a little bit about it on the last video. He's kind of more or less laid out the pathway to pay for it. But basically it's taking a slice of all the taxes gathered from sales and tech companies and whatnot, and using that as a way to give back to the people. But one other interesting concept that I think he pitched that could possibly help with this universal basic income is when he was talking about breaking up the tech companies, he said, okay, that might work, but you're trying to look at, 20th century solutions for 21st century problems. And really, you might break up Google into 3 Googles, but, that's not going to necessarily create competition out there. There's a reason people were using Google in the first place and not Bing. Very valid point there. Very, very, very valid point. It's not necessarily going to be the end-all, fix-all here. Okay? So what else he suggested doing, and I had to say I thought this was a very clever idea and I liked it, is that all these tech companies who are making profit by using your personal information and they're able to sell it to advertisers and so on and so forth, are you getting a chunk of that? I'm not. The only thing I'm getting is the ad trying to sell me something. Meanwhile, when you agree to their terms of service, they get your personal information, they sell it and whatnot. Now, a big part of the whole Capitol Hill testimonies, going back last year, this year, where they were bringing in, Twitter's execs and Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress and so on and so forth. They were grilling them about, well, why are you doing this with people's information? Blah, blah, blah. And basically what their response was, okay, we have to find a way to fund this and keep it free. The only other alternative is if you're going to pay for it. And so, therefore, we need advertisers. Advertisers want to advertise to you, but the issue was that they were basically peddling out your personal information with, and of course, their argument was, well, you consented to it in our terms of service. But did you really make it known? I mean, you put in a term of service that's how many pages long? Probably people had to read through half a dictionary to see that fine print in some cases. So that was a big part. That was what Andrew Yang's proposing is, okay, yeah, keep it free, get your advertisers, give me a cut for using my personal information. I like it. You're selling my personal information, and as he put it, clearly your personal information has become more valuable than oil. Okay? But this universal basic income, a big rebuttal about that. Well, why should we give money to people who just want to sit at home and do nothing? Why should we be giving out money to somebody who doesn't want to have a job? That's no good. That's not going to incentivize people to work. Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's part of the whole premise of his argument on this, and that is automation is going to be coming along and is going to take away a lot of the jobs people currently have today. Now, $1,000 a month is not enough, especially in a place like New York, and he has acknowledged this. You certainly couldn't live off of it, okay? And in other countries where they've been trying universal basic incomes, a lot of times it's not exactly a livable income. You would probably still need a job of some sort in order to get by, okay? However, examine this for a moment, okay? Basically, if you take this money, he's saying you're going to opt out of taking anything like food stamps, housing assistance, any other money program where they send money to you right now. Now, he said that if you don't want universal basic income, you feel like your food stamps and whatnot were giving you more support than this, you can keep that. Or if you think that $1,000 in your hand would be better suited to you, well, then you can get that. Okay, well, that seems like a, pretty good idea to me. Now, one difference that I have found from Andrew Yang's plan as compared to where they've actually implemented it, take Finland, for example. So Andrew Yang has basically said that anyone could get this universal basic income. He said that on Bloomberg. He even went on to say that Bloomberg himself could get this $1,000 a month if he wanted it. Well, not that I think that many of them would be trying to take it, but then again, I would certainly see some greedy, rich people out there say, oh, yeah, I'm paying into it. Sure, give me $1,000 a month too. Me personally, I do feel like there should I feel like that the taxes, unlike Social Security, where if you make over a certain amount of money, you're not paying into Social Security after that amount, I think they should have lifted that cap a long time ago, because especially now that it's got a funding crisis. Now, one could argue, hey, we the rich people didn't cause that funding crisis. The government did when they started dipping into the pool and taking the money out. So maybe the government should have to replace it. Don't raise taxes on me. Okay, I'll give them that argument. Maybe it should be the government that has to fix it. But nonetheless, it's got a funding crisis. I do think that cap should have been raised, just me personally. And so therefore, I think that everyone should be paying into this universal basic income. Now, the only thing that I can say is I don't feel like if you make over X amount, you should be cashing in on that program. Why do you need it? Really? Really? If you're making $90,000 a year, you need that $1,000 a month, do you? No. I know people making $90,000 a year. And when something comes up that they need done at the drop of a hat, they're able to go buy a new car when they need to. They've got a lot of money put away for when they retire. Yeah. Maybe it's because I'm a younger person, but I'm not that well off by any means. I can tell you right now, if something happened to my car tomorrow, buying a new car is out of the choice, it's completely out of the option for me. It's not going to happen. Okay? So, with that being said, someone like me and other hardworking people out there could definitely benefit from a system like that. And, of course, Andrew Yang's proposal for how he's going to pay for it. Start getting some of these players who are using loopholes to not pay taxes at all. It's time for you to start getting some skin in the game, son. Start paying your taxes. Okay, so that right there, hey, who's going to argue with that when you see rich billionaires taking loopholes to pay less in taxes than the poor people are? I mean, really? So, the pushback, like I said, there's a lot of people saying that, you know, well, it's giving free money out. And then the other thing that I would say is, you know, Finland is not just giving it out to everyone. They're giving it out to people who are either, right now, as far as I know, they're actually just giving it out to the unemployed. I would go a little bit farther than that, just because I feel like that alone could actually, where they say the people who are making, you know, the minimum wage. Now, we still need to have that minimum wage debate. We still need to look into how we could fix that. I've pitched my, you know, proposal on how to take care of it, you know, and use a kind of a combination of supply side and demand side economics. Use tax cuts for the businesses, but then you need to put stipulations on them. And I know people are saying, well, how are we tax cut business even more if we're needing to raise taxes to fund these programs? Again, remember, there's a lot of businesses who are getting out of paying these taxes in the first place. Right now, you've got people like Jeff Bezos paying virtually nothing in taxes. And he's right at like the wealthiest man in the world. Okay? How much sense does that make? Like he's got more money than anyone else, but he's not paying taxes. Okay. Yeah. That's logical. So, again, you know, when you fix that tax issue, you're going to start getting a lot more revenue in right there in the first place. So, take care of the wage issue, but we'll leave that for a separate topic. Let's just focus on the universal basic income principle and what Andrew Yang's concept and idea is for a moment, okay? So, what most people don't realize is that this is not a new concept. And all the people who are going to be coming at this concept and attacking this concept right now are, I would be willing to wager, conservative, right-wing, or right-leaning. They're going to come in this and say, oh, well, that's just, I believe you ought to have to work for your money and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So let's take a look at a clip showing which U.S. president actually pitched a concept like this almost 50 years ago.
Imagine a world where an economic disaster is on the horizon. Economists are predicting automation could lead to millions of people losing their jobs, increases in poverty, inequality, social breakdown. The solution? What about guaranteeing every citizen an unconditional amount of money? A basic income without any strings attached. So now you have Silicon Valley CEOs right now calling for basic income.
We should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas.
And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income. I don't think we're going to have a choice.
But here's the thing. The basic income isn't some crazy new idea. It's not even new. Go back to more than 40 years, where you can find the President of the United States set to announce a sweeping national program, a basic income for every American. Wait, is that Nixon? Richard Nixon, Republican president, went in front of the nation and declared,
let us place a floor under the income of every family with children in America.
How could a Republican president nearly 50 years ago be decades ahead of fighting for a liberal social...
So, before we go any farther here, I want that to just sink in for a moment. This is a concept that was pushed by Richard Nixon. And there's others who talk about other Republican presidents, going all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt, for example, having a concept of this exact theory and philosophy, basically. Okay, now, a lot of you are probably sitting here wondering right now, well, wait a minute, if Richard Nixon was pushing for this, why haven't we heard any more about it? Obviously, there must have been some flaw with it. It couldn't work. That's why it never passed. I mean, why else would they be talking about it 50 years ago and then it just died out today? Clearly, there's something wrong here. Bear with us a moment. This video will get to it shortly.
Program now backed by the Netherlands. What made Richard Nixon want a basic income? This is Rutger Bregman. He's a young Dutch economist who has been one of the biggest advocates for the basic income.
A basic income is a monthly grant that is enough to pay for your basic needs. So food, shelter, education.
Right now, there's a growing consensus that automation risks the livelihood of millions of people and that a basic income could help soften the blow. Go back to the 60s and you'll see those same fears about automation killing jobs driving the basic income debate.
You know, the computer age was upon us. People were talking about post-industrial America, and that was going to have repercussions for the workforce.
So now this was on the heels of the federal government passing food stamps, giving health care to the poor and the elderly. The next big idea to tackle poverty.
So I want you to stop and look at all those programs that just flashed across the screen there also. Social Security, Medicaid. I mean, the trend you're starting to see here is that 50s, 60s, 70s, especially during the 50s, we didn't really have much of the, it was Lyndon Johnson who signed Medicare, for example, okay? So that's obviously the 60s. But you go back and you look at the 50s, we had a big industrial revolution, you know. The jobs were coming in hot. The troops came back home from World War II. The American economy was going great. And you're talking right there around the baby boomer area. Okay, American middle class was doing pretty good back in those days. Okay, 60s came along, middle class still wasn't doing bad. I mean, they were still doing good. And you'll notice there were a lot of these programs that Republicans and Democrats didn't really seem to want to fight too bad, like cats and dogs, over in the first place. You actually see some of these issues that Republicans were okay with. It wasn't until many years later when Republicans started wanting to do crap like privatize Social Security because there was a money issue. And there was, again, a money issue because people were dipping their hands into that pool, taking money out and putting IOUs in. Okay?
Poverty was the basic income.
So at that point, at the beginning of the 70s, Richard Nixon said, well, if everyone thinks this is a good idea, let me be the president that makes history.
I mean, this was sort of a way to try to steal the Democrats' thunder, to try to get ahead of a popular issue.
Nixon's plan was called the Family Assistance Plan, and it guaranteed a family of four $1,600 a year in income. That's around $10,000 today. The plan seemed destined to pass.
Now, I want you to think about that. They said $1,600 a year is roughly close to about $10,000 today. $10,000 today, that would be $1,000 a month for 10 months. So, I mean, there's obviously 12 months in a year. It wouldn't quite be $1,000 a month, but you get the concept here. We're not too far off from where Andrew Yang's talking, okay? So, basically what I want you to understand here is that Richard Nixon's plan really, as far as how much money we're talking about getting out here, isn't that far off from Andrew Yang's. And this was something that he was pushing for back in his presidency during the 70s. And you just heard the man say it seemed destined to pass. So now for all you people who are wondering, well, why haven't we ever heard about this? Why didn't it get passed? Where's that catch-22 at? Where's the problem? Here you go.
But then something happened, and this is where it gets kind of nutty. This guy is Martin Anderson. He was one of Nixon's aides and a staunch, dyed-in-the-wool conservative. he saw Nixon's plan as counter to everything he believed and wrote up a report for Nixon to read.
And this report and all these quotes, they were about something that happened in England 150 years earlier. So what they implemented is what you can call the first welfare system the world ever saw. It's called the Speenhamland system, named after the place where it started, and it was sort of a basic income. It was pretty much unconditional, so all the poor would get it, whether they were employed or not. So there was no distinction between the deserving poor and the undeserving poor.
The English government at the time commissioned a report to see the effects of this radical new idea. The results? Wages dropped, marriages were torn apart, chaos reigned. The report gave critics an ideological framework to attack welfare. Without proper oversight, benefits given to the poor wouldn't help them, and they would actually make their problems worse. Nixon saw this and panicked.
Especially started using a different kind of language. He started to talk much more in the way of, workfare, that we really need to push the poor into jobs and that they are often lazy, etc., etc.
This 150-year-old English study somehow ended up changing the course of the basic income. Oh, and it was total bull.
Now, the crazy thing is that at the same time that Nixon was saying this, historians were looking again at the original report from 1834 about Speenhamland and discovered that actually it was a huge hoax. In reality, Speenhamland had been, it had been a success. It was one of the reasons why there eventually was no revolution in England.
So because of this weird old historical report, the president's plans changed. He pushed for an amendment and required recipients to sign up with the Department of Labor, work requirements were debated, and ultimately a new consensus around welfare formed, with Republicans and Democrats, that the poor needed to qualify for government benefits, to prove that they're working or looking for a job. And with that, the basic income was swept under the rug of American politics, until now. The fact that you somehow had Richard Nixon and the Black Panthers supporting the same thing shows what a unique idea the basic income is. Nixon recognized that. He saw the basic income as a popular program he could steal from Democrats. So here's the question. Could another Republican president who's desperate to pass a popular program and without a fixed ideology maybe make the same game?
So, there you go. That's why it never got passed, okay? And as you heard, the people who have looked back on the Speenhamland, I think is how they were pronouncing it, has basically found there's a lot of facts that were reported for many, many years that are pretty questionable. Now, one of the things that I read up just doing some quick homework on this Speenhamland program, okay? Basically, they created what were called workhouses. That's not what a universal basic income is. They were taking the poor, and yes, they were getting them off the streets and so on and so forth, but they were subjecting them to bad working conditions in workhouses. How, in any possible way, is that the same thing as the universal basic income? What that was a prime example back in Nixon's day of someone who was far over on the right, heavily conservative, probably had a nice little bit of wealth and didn't believe in the concept of paying a little bit more in taxes to help society out as a whole. There's a lot of people on the right who believe that if you're poor because you're dumb, stupid, and did nothing with your life. That's just simply not true. There's a lot of people who were born into their wealth. They didn't have to earn it. Their forefathers, the people who came before them, may have started a business that became very successful. And at one point in this country, that was a lot more achievable of an American dream in a lot of places than it is in a lot of ways today. Okay? At one point in time, people really did have a bigger chance at being more of an entrepreneur, trying to start a product, get it out there. There's a lot of economists that said if you were a baby boomer and somehow didn't, make a lot of money through the stock market at the time and whatnot, it was your own fault. I mean, hey, we'll chalk that up to opinion. But the point is, today, lot different. Okay? So, it's not people's fault in a lot of cases that they're poor. Now, yes, some people decide to not do anything with their life, with their career, try to further themselves in any way, shape, or form. They do blow their opportunities, and yes, it is those people's fault. But does that mean that is the case for everyone? No. Trying to apply that blanket statement to poor people that the only reason you're poor is because you wasted your opportunities would be just like trying to apply any other racial stereotype to a race just because a couple of people within that race have fit that stereotype. You wouldn't find that acceptable for that, so why would you find that acceptable for people who are not making $50, $60, $70, $80, $90,000, $100 a year? People who are living below that income might just be living below that income because they had to get out and go to work and do the hard jobs for a living because, you know, they didn't have a wealthy family who could just downright pay for them to go to college. And you get a lot of people, well, they could qualify for federal money and federal grant. Yeah, that's exactly right. But you also have to try to do that while maintaining working 40 hours a week plus other things. Now, hey, some people do it. Some people just bust their ass to no end to get that education. And then what really is disheartening is that in a lot of cases, they bust their ass, work 40 hours a week, get that education, and then have a hard time placing the job. And meanwhile, they've ran up student loan debt. Doesn't that sound reassuring? You go to school, you put in all that time and effort, and you come out, and now you owe a bunch of money. Okay? So this universal basic income would just help people pay for that college tuition, make that house payment, make that car insurance payment if you're like myself, and they're charging because there's so many younger people out here who are careless in their driving that we have to pay over $400 a month for me and my wife, and we don't have full coverage on any of our vehicles. Okay? So, you know, things like that would do great. And we're not talking the same thing here. So again, you know, let that sink in just how far back a concept like this was being pitched. And the reason you don't hear anything about it, you know, today is because you've got far too many people out there who don't want to have to start paying their fair share of taxes, because right now you've got people like Bezos getting out of basically paying taxes at all. We're not just talking about they don't want to have to pay large amounts of taxes, because so many of them are paying less amount in taxes. Maybe the actual amount that the government's taking in from them is more than the poor people, but their percentage rate that they're being taxed at is coming out less than lower and middle class people. That's certainly not fair. If I'm paying this much, you should be paying this much, especially if you're making more money than I am. I mean, that's just how it is. That's really the red flag and the symptom that you've got a economy and a structure right now that is built to benefit the wealthy and powerful, because they're paying to elect the people who are making these laws. Okay? So the people who don't want you to have Medicare for all are the people who are tied up into big pharma and the big health insurance companies that are making billions and billions and billions of dollars of profit. They don't want their profits touched. They want that goose to keep laying those golden eggs. So they're going to bribe these politicians to try to keep it down and out. Okay? Universal basic income. Why do they want you to have that? A lot of these people out there who have these big, massive corporations, look, if people gave you $1,000 a month, you might not be that desperate to hang on to a job you're just down and out about. Okay? You might go get you a little small job, part-time job, because with that $1,000 a month, it's enough to get you by. And then you could be using some of that money to go back to college, like Andrew Yang's pitched, or whatever. Okay? Better yourself, and now you're more suited for a better job. So for all these workers out there who want to pay substandard wages, poor benefits, of course, they're going to go, a lot of them, to automation anyway. But they need you for now. So, point in case. I won't say who the company is. I won't say where I was working. But at one point, since I've been working, and at one point I had a supervisor job. And what I found that they preferred that you do, if you had employees there, because it wasn't like retail where if one just left, it was an hours and staff-based structure. You had to have so many people working at one time. If one wasn't there, someone else had to fill in. Someone was staying over. I'm coming in and covering it. So many people had to be there at one time. Okay? Now, you might have a worker who is disruptive, incorrigible, okay, didn't want to do their job. You couldn't send them home. You had to go to your boss, complain, and the general response you got back was, well, we don't want to pay out the overtime, and, they didn't say this, but they had a hard time getting people in. And so, you're just going to have to deal with it. And then what we'll do is, when we find someone else who can come in and just take this job, we'll just have to use them until that time comes, and then we will replace them. And here's one that bothered me even more. As a super, and this is part of the reason that I stepped down from this job. My conscience, I couldn't agree with things like that, But before they came to me and talked to me about going to another position within that company, that was actually going to pay me the same amount of money, I had already been considering looking for another line of work, just because I told them I did not feel comfortable doing this in the first place. The way I see it, excuse me, if you're going to do someone this way, do your own dirty work. Don't pass it off to me, because it's not my idea. But there was a position that was being created within this company. A lot of things were growing. A lot of things, technology-wise, were starting to get more and more and more complex with this particular position. And there were some people who were currently doing that position that some of the other people who worked with me and were over me were starting to look at and say, okay, they can't handle this. One was a lady who was over 70. They said, she can't handle all this technology. We're going to have to replace her. Meanwhile, this lady was one of the most dependable workers that we had. She just wasn't as up to snuff, as we say down here in the South, as some other people, younger people, would have been on technology. But as far as her reliability was concerned, she had helped me out with keeping that place staffed many different times. And she was without a doubt one of my favorite workers within the place. And she was just a joy to be around. She always had a good attitude. Okay? Then there was someone else who was very reliable, would kill the overtime every week. I mean, even though they didn't want to have overtime, we always had overtime. They never could get this place fully staffed. My branch office, who was responsible for bringing people in, they couldn't staff it at all. I mean, it was a nightmare. Okay? That being said, we always had overtime. This lady would work 56 hours a week for me, no problem. Now, I could tell it was wearing her down, but she wasn't the only one having to do it. I'm pulling 56-hour weeks myself. A couple other people are. And if it were up to me, we would have been fully staffed and they wouldn't have to deal with it. But I can't go out and hire people directly. I've got to, if I even found anyone, it's got to go through Greenville. Okay? In that office. So, that being said, this particular lady, as reliable as she was, and all the hard work she put in, she was having a lot of issues with this position and doing what she should be doing while on that position. Not paying attention, so on and so forth. They had rules about bringing food and drinks into that room. She would try to sneak them in. She'd get caught on camera having it. I'd be getting text messages late at night from my boss who could watch those cameras from home saying, hey, why is she doing this? You need to say something about this. Blah, 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 blah. Now, all those issues set aside, I'm not going to defend her and say that she wasn't in the wrong for that. But she was reliable. She was better than a lot of people who one day just quit showing up to work, show up late, call out on a regular basis. She helped me out through a lot of situations with keeping the place covered and working those long hours. She just wasn't the best suited for that particular position. Okay? That being said, I didn't want to get rid of her. I just said, okay, if she can't handle this position, we need to find someone who's as good on reliability, and we'll, you know, if they're good at the job and they're good on reliability, that's who I want to replace her, and then we'll move her back to another position, because they were going to raise the pay on that position. They said, we're not going to pay her this kind of money. She's not doing the job well enough. Can't argue with that, but I didn't think she was bad enough that we should just terminate her entirely. Okay? So they bring someone in to start training to take her position because they're ready to just get her out. Okay? I met this person they bring in, okay, and I wasn't impressed. 3 days into training, they had to go through about 2 weeks worth. 3 days into training, call out. Come back, a couple of days later, call out again. Called out twice just during training. And what we found out on a job where you needed to be available to work, okay, we really needed your dependability. Missing work was very inconvenient on other people because at the time they were looking at moving to 12-hour shifts too. And if you don't show up, the other person's stuck, literally. They're going to be stuck, okay? Or someone else is going to have to come in on a day off or time off or whatever to cover for you. It was one of those jobs where that was a serious drawback to it. Okay, so I wasn't impressed. I said, look, I said we need to bring someone in here who's just as good on reliability as who we're wanting to take out. I don't want to get someone who's good on these computers and might pay more attention to this stuff while they're in here, but then I can't count on them to be at work because I'm the one having to deal with this schedule and I'm the one who's having to put all these people on overtime. I said, so I don't want someone who's just as reliable. Well, the people over my head would hear no part of it. They said, well, we need this done. We need people in the door. We need to hire, blah, 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 blah. So what was I expected to do? I was expected to sit there, let this person who I saw serious red flags on go through training, and I said, well, let me tell you what I don't want to do. I don't want to bring this person in. I don't want to give them this job and then tell a woman who's been really busting ass and doing all this overtime for me, hey, so you've been dropping the ball. You're not good enough to maintain this job, unfortunately. I'm going to have to take you out of this position, and I'm going to put you in another position. I said, I don't want to do that, and then no time later, this person you've replaced her with not work out, and now I'm left with no one in that position, and my only real option to cover it is to put this lady back in the position I just took her out of. I said, I would not feel comfortable doing that. I feel like that's wrong, and I feel like that's using her. And the people are like, well, you don't need to look at it that way, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I'm just telling you right now, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Training completes. This person takes over. I have that conversation. Tell this lady, hey, I appreciate your hard work, and unfortunately, this was a decision that even went above my head, but we're having to take you out. But because of all the hard work you've given me, I would like to keep you here. I'm going to move you over to another position. I could tell she was very upset about it. 3 days. 3 days. And this person we just replaced her with calls out again. When I call the people over me and let them know, what's the response? Okay, we're done with them. Terminate them. Dude, what? 3 whole days. 3 whole days after I said this, They then decide they want to terminate this person, and now I'm stuck in the very position that I fought against from the get-go. I'm now having to go back to this lady I just took out of this room and say, okay, so I'm putting you back in. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to have a chance to keep the job. You're just going to sit here till we hire somebody else. That bothered me so damn much. I literally was very, very troubled by that and did not like it. And that is abuse of someone and their work. I don't care if they had issues performing on that job or not. If they've been giving you hard work and had been reliable for you when you needed them, you should repay that favor. Unfortunately, there are so many corporations out there who don't want to look at it that way, refuse to look at it that way, and only want to look at it from what is the best thing for me and my business. To hell with the rest of you. That is not a good concept in my opinion whatsoever. So, the reason they don't want you to have that universal basic income, I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but back to the point, they don't want you to have that because you might not put up with their BS. You might move on to another job, even if it pays a little less, because you've got this universal basic income coming in. You may also go out and better yourself through college or school or whatever. And then you could end up with a better job where you don't have to deal with that kind of BS. And these people want to keep workers working for their low wages, poor benefits, and poor conditions and not able to go better themselves. They've got to have all the little worker ants that are on that bottom base of the pyramid. They've got to keep all these people down. That's their goal. Keep you down, more money for me. We don't want you to have this opportunity. I know a lot of these companies say they do, but it's not financially great for them when you have people who could very easily better themselves and start possibly getting an opportunity to further themselves in life and get a little slice of that pie for themselves. Why not keep you down and keep more of that pie for myself? You'll make the pie, I'll eat the pie. I don't want you to have a slice. That's the basic concept that's going on here. So that's why so many people act like this is non-doable and it's not an issue just handing out free money. Now, I agree. You shouldn't just be trying to live off this universal basic income. You shouldn't just want to sit around on your lazy ass and do nothing. You should try to get out and work for your living. But this would really help how much money you have for your family, how much money you have for your household. Certainly would help households where, like Andrew Yang pointed out, where his wife, if you've got special needs children at home, you're able to stay home more and work with those kids. Maybe instead of having a full-time job, you get a part-time job, and that $1,000 a month helps you get that through. And through the plan that Andrew Yang has laid out, and considering, again, this is a program going all the way back to Richard Nixon, you now start to see it's not so far-fetched as a lot of people want you to believe that it really is. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Independent Report. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up and like the video. Also, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask or topics you'd like us to cover, please drop a comment in the comment box below. And also, please subscribe to the channel. And if you do subscribe, ring that bell so you'll stay up to date when we drop new videos and you'll get notifications of it. And also, please support us on Patreon. Funds are going to be used to grow and improve this channel so we can reach more and more people and spread the message that the mainstream media doesn't want to tell people. We hope you'll tune in next time.